I leave Washington to return to be one among them and hope to be a voice of unity and virtue.
Unity is needed in our nation. You know that. Tonight, more than ever. And we should remember that oneness is not sameness, and compromise is not capitulation.
But while Senator-elect Curtis may be open to compromise, he is also willingness to buck his party's leadership. So this week, I went to Capitol Hill to talk one-on-one with the man who says he doesn't want to be just a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. So I noticed you were on the Senate floor when Mitt Romney gave his farewell address. I'm not going to ask you, are you the next Mitt Romney in the Senate? But what's your sense of his legacy?
Well, listen, Mitt Romney, no matter what you say about him, everybody says he's true to who he is. And that's such a great attribute. I wish we could say that about all of us. And if they say that about me when I'm done, I'll be very happy.
He had this independence, and obviously he was willing to stand up against his own party's leadership.
Yeah.
Is that something you see yourself doing?
You know, it's very important to me that President Trump is successful. I want to see him wildly successful. And I'll be supportive of him when he's talking about inflation and the economy and everything like that. But that doesn't mean there won't be moments when I disagree with him. And I think it's very important to me and my constituents that at those moments that I feel comfortable speaking up.
So I know you don't like labels, but you hear MAGA Republican,
yeah.
Romney Republican, McCain Republican. Where do you fit?
So the best description for me is normal.
Normal. Okay.
I like that label. Yeah, and the problem is with labels is it's kind of a shortcut to stereotype somebody, right? We like to just have this very quick, oh, you fit into this, and therefore I don't have to know anything more about you because you are moderate, right? Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is it's not that simple. A moderate in Salt Lake City is different than a moderate in St. George or a moderate in Massachusetts. So to try to say somebody's a moderate or something just doesn't fit. And I really like to align myself with core Utah values, and the best way to describe those are our pioneer values.
Now, you ran for the Senate, and Trump endorsed one of your opponents.
That's correct.
Actually did a campaign. I mean, it really got into it for one of your opponents, and you still won.
So I'll just brag for a minute. I won in a four-way primary with almost 50%.
Yeah.
And as the non-Trump endorsed candidate.
And I think, was it a double-digit lead over the...
It was a substantial lead.
Substantial lead over the person Trump. How did you do that? I mean, he's the king of the Republican Party. His endorsement matters more than any other endorsement in a Republican primary. What was the key there?
I believe I was able to be the authentic John Curtis, and that people are longing for authenticity. And as I mentioned before, look, I support President Trump when he's dealing with some of these really tough issues that we have, the economy and the conflicts overseas, but I do have my own mind. And I'm not a rubber stamp. My stamp is the stamp of the state of Utah, and I represent those people. And I think people responded to that in the election. And they're dying for authenticity, and just tell us who you really are and then be that person. And I think that's why we did so well.
You do hear some of your colleagues, your future colleagues in the Senate, that say, he won, he's got a mandate, he deserves everybody that he's chosen. So in other words, rubber stamp.
Yeah, I heard that from my son, by the way, at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, he said that?
He did. He said, Dad, I'm a self-described, I took the red pill. So he kind of set that up. And my response to him was a couple of things. One, in kind of a joking way, I said, I did get more votes than him in Utah. Does that give me a mandate? And but let me come back to this concept that I think me speaking my mind and me being upfront makes the president a better president. And right now I'm interviewing these nominees, and I think people forget the advice part of advice and consent. I can't advise the president if I haven't thoroughly talked to these people, if I haven't investigated everything about them, if I haven't learned their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think I owe that to the president. And I think if the better job I do, the better president he will be.
So you've made it clear in things you have said that you're going to look very closely at all these nominees.
Yes.
It certainly seems possible you would vote against some. Maybe you'll end up voting for all of them. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, so I think it's important that I go in with this blank sheet. And by the way, I've met with some of the more controversial ones. And
you've met with Pete Hegseth, you've met with Kash Patel.
Yeah, and in both cases, when Kash came in, I had already read his book. Mm-hmm. I had talked to 3 or 4 people he had worked with. And when Pete came in, I said, Pete, look, tell me which book you want me to read, and I will read it of your books. Tell me who you want me to talk to so I get to find out who the real Pete is. Mm-hmm. Because I know as a politician, everything that's in the paper, I shouldn't take it firsthand. Right. And I want to learn myself who he is and what kind of job he will do.
So let's take those two for a minute, because you said you did, these were serious issues that have been raised about Pete Hegseth, I believe is what you said. Did he resolve those issues with you, or are you still?
No, and by the way, there was no way that we're going to resolve those in a 30-minute conversation.
Right. Did you get into it at all? Did you ask him about the...
We did, but only so slightly, because in my mind, I'm looking at this process. He still has to go for a hearing. He still has to have an FBI check. It's a little premature for me, right, to try to resolve all these things in 30 minutes. So I asked him what he was going to do in his first 100 days, what he was going to do in his first 500 days. And we did get into those issues, but for me, they remain unresolved, and I shouldn't try to resolve them until I have this big, broad canvas of information about him.
But I've also seen you've taken heat, especially online, social media, from supporters of the president say, what's wrong with you? Just get in line already.
Listen.
Why are you asking questions? Why are you saying you have concerns?
Anybody who wants to give me heat for doing my job, bring it on. This is my job. It's my constitutional responsibility. These same people are the same people who would have said earlier, you need to take power back from the executive branch. You need to do your job. I have heard that from these very same people, and that's what I'm doing.
And Kash Patel, I mean, what do you make of the talk of retribution? Revenge?
So those were very specific conversations I had with him. For me, one of the most important things that I needed to hear from Kash is that he would be blind to political affiliation. Mm-hmm. Because I know some of the things that he's said and that have been attributed to him.
You read his book.
Yeah, and it was important to me that he goes after bad guys.
Yeah.
And I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats. And we had some very specific conversations about that. And I wanted to make sure that he would be blind to that.
And President Trump himself has talked about going after Liz Cheney, suggesting very recently that she could face criminal charges. Does that stuff concern you?
You know, he said those same things about Hillary Clinton a number of years ago.
Lock her up, I recall.
Lock her up. And so I wouldn't say I'm not concerned, but I'm also watching.
Part of this whole confrontation that we see happening across the way, you're still a House member, is over the debt ceiling. Trump wants the debt ceiling to be raised in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And he's saying if it doesn't happen, you know, shut the government down. I mean, he told me this directly.
So a lot of people ask me when I say I'm sometimes going to have my differences with the president, give me a good example. Mm-hmm. And I'll just tell you from my previous service with him at the same time, it's spending. Mm-hmm. Utah is one of the most thrifty places on the planet.
So you wouldn't favor this idea of doing away with the debt ceiling? And
no, and not only that, we have to do far more to rein in our spending. And that is a big deal in Utah. That's what my constituents expect me to do. And I would say one of the biggest reasons they sent me here.
And you don't think Trump is particularly serious about reining in spending?
We'll see. I mean, this whole Elon Musk and Vivek thing, let's see. Let's see if he actually finds cuts. Listen, I was the mayor of my city, and I had to have a balanced budget, and I made cuts, and we did it successfully. We actually improved morale by making cuts, and there are good ways and bad ways to make these cuts.
And when you talk to President Trump, because you will,
yes,
what are you going to tell him?
I want him to be wildly successful. I'm going to be winning his back on things like inflation. I want him to bring peace around the world. I want to deal with the border situation, and I'm really there for him. I want to be helpful. And Mr. President, from time to time, I'm going to disagree with you, and it will be respectful. And I think when I disagree with you, it will be helpful, and I hope you'll listen to me.
Our thanks to Senator-elect Curtis. Coming up, we'll talk to the Senate Democrat who calls Donald Trump a, quote, singular political talent.